Hello, it's Ron Climer again, and this is video number 3 in the For My Classmates series. I hope you know what For My Classmates means. If you don't, then you don't need to know. This is for the North Carolina real estate math, and if y'all have your textbook with you, come with me to page 400, because what I want to talk about is the comparable sales approach, and as I understand it, we need to know this. Now, they don't do this in this textbook, but the way I learned this 100 years ago is we had a little thing, little memory peg called CBS CIA. CBS CIA. That's like CBS. If you want everybody to know about it, put it on CBS. If you don't want anybody to know about it, deal with the CIA. But that stands for if the comparable is better, we subtract. If the comparable is inferior, we add. And this is the way I learned this 100 years ago. And when I was teaching in a classroom, when I got to this part of the book, and by the way, I suggest you write this down on page 400 vertically like I wrote it down there. And I used to tell my students, I want you to write this down under the picture. We had a picture in the book, and I want you to write it down exactly the way I say it. And what I would say is never, 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 never adjust the subject. You never adjust the subject. You always adjust the comparable. So we have a problem that says the comp has 3 bass. The subject has 2 bass. And a bath is worth $5,000. All right? That information's given in the question. Well, CBS CIA. I hope y'all got this written down because I'm fixing to erase it. So CBS CIA. If the comparable's better, we subtract. If the comparable's inferior, we add, and we never adjust the subject. So here's the deal. We've got 4 choices. A, B, C, D. We've got add $5,000 to the comp. We've got subtract $5,000 from the comp. We've got subtract $5,000 from the subject. And we've got add $5,000 to the subject. That's the only choices you can have. Well, first thing we remember is we never, 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 never adjust the subject. So C and D, they got no chance of being the right answer, leaving us with C, B, S, C, I, A. If the comparable is better. Is the comparable better? Yes, it is. So we're going to subtract $5,000 from the comp. So if the comp sold for $300,000, if it only had 2 bass, it would have sold for $295. That may not be a fact, but it's Mr. Appraiser's expert opinion. So we subtract from the comp. We never, 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 never adjust from the subject. And if you got that, you can take anything and figure that one out. So that's CBS, CIA, that's how you do comps, or at least that's the way I do comps. If that'll help you, use it. Never, 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 never adjust the subject. Always, always, always adjust the comparable. So if it says to or from subject, wrong answer. Now, and by the way, I apologize. I can't even remember what I did this morning, so I'm hoping I'm not repeating myself. If I am, skip past it or watch it twice. But gross rent multiplier. Y'all remember that? Now, gross rent multiplier, this is basically a little rule of thumb that we use in appraising. It's not deadly accurate, it's just kind of a general thing. But if it's just a ratio between the price and the rent. So if you're trying to decide if this house over here is worth what somebody's asking for it, let's say there's a house in the neighborhood that just sold for $129,500. All right? And that house is rented for $1,100 a month, or it should be. Now this is a little house, duplex, triplex. We're not going to do this on a 20-unit apartment building, but a little duplex, triplex house, something like that. We would take this information. All right, y'all put that in your calculator for me. 129.5 divided by 1,100. 129.5 divided by 1,100, and my calculator says 117.7. So that's the gross rent multiplier for that house. Well, we know another house down the street that just sold for $113,500, and it's rented for $1,050 a month. All right, so we take that information, put that in the calculator. Let's see, 113,500 divided by 1,050, and we see that that one is 108.1. All right. Well, there's another house around the corner, the same neighborhood, that just sold for $119,000, and it's rented for $1,075 a month. By the way, how do we know this information? It tells us in the test question. So we take this one, $119,000 price divided by rent, $1,075, and so that one comes to 110.7. So these are the gross rent multipliers for houses in the neighborhood. Well, what do we do with that information? Well, let's average these. 816, 2, 3. You know, I'm doing that manually. Don't do that on the exam. Use your calculator. 117.7 plus 108.1 plus 110.7 equals, oops, I did, I'm glad I used a calculator, 336, and then divide that by 3. So we divide that by 3. So the average gross rent multiplier for this neighborhood is 112.1. And so if we wanted to know what another house was worth, guy says, I want to sell my house and it rents for $1,000 a month. We say, well, what are you asking for it? He says, well, $75,000 bucks. Get up from watching the Packer game and go look at that house. If he says 130,000 bucks, we'll call you tomorrow, because this is pretty much 112 times what the house rents for. Tells us that house is probably worth about $112,000. Now, all we need to know is how to do this part right here. So if we can take the price, divide it by the rent, and we do this with little duplexes, triplexes, maybe single family homes. You don't do this with 60 unit buildings, with 50 unit buildings, stuff like that. This is just a little rule of thumb. It's called gross rent multiplier. Let's prorate these HOA dues, and I think I'm gonna call it a day on this. So now, typically, usually, most of the time, just about always, I hope it tells you in the question, HOA dues are paid in advance. So let's say our HOA dues are $180 per month. And let's say we're going to have a closing on September the 19th. So we're going to have a closing on September the 19th. Well, on the first of the month, Mr. Seller paid the HOA dues for the month. Is that right? So we're going to take the $180. We're going to divide it by the 30 days in September, and we're going to ascertain what it is per day. All right? $180 divided by 30 days. My calculator says it's $6 per day. Now, the seller owns the property in September 19 days. All right? $6 times 19 days. $6 times 19 days is 114. So Mr. Seller has used up $114 worth of the HOA dues. He has paid $180 because he paid it in advance. He's going to be looking for Mr. Buyer to give him the rest of that money back at the closing on the 19th. So let's see, $180 minus $114, is that right? My calculator says $66. So Mr. Seller is going to be looking for a credit to the seller, debit to the buyer. The buyer is going to be turning the money over to the seller, and the seller is going to, by the way, I had this on a previous video. If y'all don't know this, the way I learned this a million years ago was that the debits are frowny faces. That's the debits. And the credits are the smiley faces. Because if you stop and think about it, here we are at the closing on September the 19th. Mr. Seller is getting the money. He's smiling. Mr. Buyer is paying the money. He's frowning. Debit, frowny face. Credit, smiley face. And you can't miss if you'll use that. So anyway, that's HOA dues, and I think we're going to call this. I think I'm going to call this a series. I'm going to put this on YouTube. I want you to use it. If it helps you, great. When you go take your state exam, if you want to send me an email and let me know how you did, and let me know how it was, and let me know if you saw any of this stuff or anything I told you was any kind of help. I'm Ron Climer at yahoo.com. If you run across anything you think I'd like to know, send me an email. Thank you very much.